Hello, yes. Welcome all to the Rode Hoed for what will be, I hope, a very exciting and informative evening. The organization, Sauer, was a bit afraid that there is war fatigue in Amsterdam and in the Rode Hoed as well. But there isn't. This hall is sold out. And so many people will watch this via a streaming video. Hello. I heard that there are a lot of people watching now. So that's very good news that you came up and that you came to the Rode Hoed today. Because as we all know, after October 7th, the attention on the front pages went from Ukraine, Russia to Gaza, Israel, which is rightly so. But this subject, this war, needs a lot of attention. So what happened is that there is an unbelievable lineup, I can say, from guests from the Netherlands, but mostly from other countries. And some of them wrote books. And I just want to tell you, I just finished this book, No War. I know you have all seen her. Marina Ovsyannikova is here. And where are you, Marina? Are you here? Hello, hi. Luckily you are here, yeah. We all know you from, claim to fame is a couple of seconds with your placard in a live television show opposing this war in Russia. And what happened after is in this book. I finished it today. It's a really good read. I recommend it to all of you. And we'll talk about that. Then an old friend of mine is John Sweener, killer in the Kremlin. Moordenaar in the Kremlin. Het is ook vertaald. It's also translated in Dutch. We met each other in Kiev last March. One of the best filmmakers, producer of Russia is here. Alexander Rodnyansky. And there are some surprise guests also here, because anywhere, I know Derek for a long time and Ellen as well, and everywhere where you guys show up, people will show up as well. And suddenly this whole panel tonight that we have has changed. More people were added, and people who are very close to President Zelensky are suddenly here in the room. So it's exciting for me as well, because there was no time to prepare for all of the guests. But maybe you know them well, and there is also some time for questions and answers. Then, to make this very short, because the mayor is here as well, Mayor Femke Halsema, and last year she opened this evening, which was great, because this is naturally the city of Spinoza and of free thinkers and people who can do their work as journalists, writers, publishers in other countries, and Amsterdam has that tradition. Last year, when we were here, I think about 20 or 30 journalists from Russia were in Amsterdam. Now that has gone up to 150, which is quite amazing. And maybe, I don't know exactly, Amsterdam is at this time one of the hotspots for Russian journalists in exile. So, one of the reasons that they are welcome here is naturally the Dutch government welcomed them. But also you need housing and schools, and people have to find a new life in this city. And I'm really proud. I'm not from Amsterdam, I'm also import, but to have a city council that takes care of the people here as well, also the Russian journalist in exile. So, one of the people who does that is the mayor of Amsterdam. Here is Femke Halsema.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just start by saying that I'm really honored just to sit next to you for some seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, more than a year ago, as was already mentioned, I delivered the opening speech for the 30th anniversary celebrations of the Moscow Times. At the time, the war in Ukraine had been going on for 9 months. A lot has happened since then, in Russia and in the rest of the world. From what we hear, it appears that daily life in some Russian cities has gone back to normal. Cinemas, nightclubs are open again, and people are going to restaurants and started traveling again. The economy is improving, life goes on, and the war seems far away. But the war has not ended. And Putin's repression, both at home and abroad, persists. On the 30th of March 2023, the American journalist and reporter Evan Gershkovich who was working for the Wall Street Journal as well as the Moscow Times, was arrested in Yekaterinburg. I hope I pronounce it well, more or less. Yeah? While he was out reporting, he is said to be suspected of espionage. There is no, as you probably all know, there is no legal basis for this. It was the first time in almost 40 years that an American journalist was detained and held in Russian territory because of espionage. The last time was during the Cold War. Ivan Gershkovich has been detained for 314 days today, and as yet there is no prospect of his release. Derek and Pjotr, Sauer has known Evan since he was a child. To you, he is a dear friend. You share a love and fascination for Russia, the country that for so long you called home. Ivan's wrongful and unconstitutional detention must feel like a personal tragedy to you. Your efforts to secure his release are really inspiring. In the past year, other media organizations have joined the Moscow Times journalists in Amsterdam, including TV Rain and Medusa. More than 80, I thought 80, but you just said 150, journalists now work from Amsterdam. And Amsterdam is turning into a true media hub thanks to, amongst others, Dirk's efforts. And that deserves great respect. Thank you. The speakers here tonight have lived in exile for a long time. Since the beginning of the war, they have been trying to report on their country's economy, politics, and culture from afar. And that is not only incredibly sad, but it's also extremely difficult. How do you report on your country from afar, on life that's going on without you? How can you arm yourself against fake news and propaganda? What is it like to address readers from such a distance? And what still makes your job worthwhile? Putin's regime is increasingly putting Russian journalists in exile on its official wanted lists. This has only increased our respect for their courage and perseverance. We must stand up for journalists because they provide the counterweight to maintain our democracy and rule of law. Trust in the independent and free press as an institution is dwindling, as is trust in governments. In his book on tyranny, thank you, tyranny, the American historian Timothy Snyder teaches us 20 lessons from the 20th century. Lesson number 10 says, believe in truth. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power, because there is no basis upon which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. End of quote. To guarantee our freedom, we need to stand up for truth. During the 30th anniversary celebrations for the Moscow Times, I quoted the Russian author Maxim Osipov. All wars, he said, come to an end. Well, it doesn't look like the end is coming soon, and it's hard to remain hopeful in the midst of such difficult and sometimes seemingly hopeless circumstances. One of my favorite authors is Rebecca Solnit. She uses rowing as a beautiful metaphor of hope. She says, you row forwards looking back, Everybody who knows rowing knows how it works. You row forward looking back, and telling our histories, she continues, is part of helping people navigate toward the future. End of quote. Hope, Solnit says, enables us to accept uncertainty and dare us to move towards an unknown and unseen future. But we can only do so when we know the journey we have already undertaken, when we know our history. To know this history, we need not only historians, but also scientists, writers, artists, and journalists. They narrate, construct, and nourish our story. Journalists can help us navigate toward the future. The work you do here together tonight, through your media channels, is invaluable. It is of the utmost importance that you can continue to do so here in Amsterdam, in exile, as long as is necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Femke Halsema. Derek, you wanted to say something as well about your friend Evan. And since this is an evening of improvisation, maybe I can add something, if you're okay with it. I just heard from your son, Pjotr, that he received a letter from Evan yesterday from prison. Yeah. Is it okay if he does like together, the two of you, father and son, use the microphone and tell what you want to tell about Evan, and maybe you could quote from the letter that Evan just sent from prison.
Before we do that, of course the mayor was correct, and you were not, Twan. You were wrongly informed. So we do have 80 Russian journalists in Amsterdam. Yes, that's why Of course the mayor is right.
Not always.
But in total, with support staff and family members, we have 150 people we take care of.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for bringing up Evan. It means a lot to me. It's 315 days. Soon it'll be a year that Evan will be behind bar, in jail, and right now it still seems like he'll be there for a while. Like every Monday, I got a letter from him yesterday, and you got one as well, but I haven't sent it to you yet.
Okay.
It's a laborious process because he sends letters to all his friends in Russian, and a few of his friends have to methodically look at the letters and make out his writing and then translate it into English for the people that can't read his writing. In his letter yesterday, I think the beauty of our communication is that we just talk about what's going on in our lives, and he told me that he can't wait to be sentenced because he wants to go to colony. He's now spent 315 days in the Fortowa, which is a tiny, tiny prison cell, where he's only spending time with one other person, and that's the only point of contact he has. He's hoping to be sentenced and to go to colony, where he'll be sort of also in a very harsh environment, where he'll have to work, but at least he'll be able to walk around. He'll be able to talk to other prisoners and have a bit less social isolation. Eventually we hope that Evan will be freed. Obviously, we don't have much hope in the Russian justice system, but there are other ways, and I think right now everyone's talking about a prison exchange, and that seems to be like the most probable way to get Evan out of jail. But Evan, I'm proud of him because if you've seen the pictures of him in court a few weeks ago, he was smiling, he was strong. You can see he was joking with the prosecutors. I'm sure he's trying to make them laugh, and after so long in jail, he's clearly not a broken man, and that's just a ridiculous feat. And I think he's the proof that journalists often are victims of authoritarian regimes, but he was the one getting information out of Russia, and he's not the only one who's unfortunately behind bars in Russia and in other places. So please, keep thinking about Evan. You can always write him a letter. We have an email account that we translate all the letters to him. It's free, gershkovich@gmail.com. And keep him in your mind, and just let's give an applause for Evan. I know he won't hear it, but I'll tell him.
Nee, is goed.
Okay, thank you very much, Pjotr. We'll see you back in the panel. Derek, together we'll do an interview with one of your friends. Which chair would you like? You go sit next to the guest.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you know each other very well. The introduction is he's a Ukrainian-Russian film and media manager, co-founder of a Russian production company called Art Picture Studio, and a Ukrainian film company, Kinodom. And he is the producer of many famous films, not only in Russia, but to name a few, Leviathan, Stalingrad, The Death of Stalin, and one of my favorite movies, he was co-producer of that one, is Cloud Atlas, which I saw with a couple of friends here in the hall in New York in 2016, I think. Hurricane Sandy just hit New York, and it was a great evening with this film. So, without further ado, Alexander Rodnyansky is our next guest. Here he is. Oh, careful. Here we go. I should say that you travel between Germany, Los Angeles, Kyiv, and you have no Russian passport, even though you have worked there for 20 years.
Yes, I never had Russian passport.
Did you have foresight that this was maybe a bad idea to have?
No, I lived there as a Ukrainian. That's why I never thought it is important for me to get the Russian citizenship. And most importantly, I came to Russia in the times when it sounds, I know, strange today. It never played any role. It was a completely different country, and they were looking for someone to run the big broadcasting company founded by a few brave American investors in Russia in the hectic end of 90s. And the new times came, and they wanted to capitalize on the growth of Russian economy. And I was running quite successfully the Ukrainian company I founded in the very beginning of the 90s, which is still the leading television network in Ukraine. And so basically I was looking for the opportunities to build up the big corporation, and they were looking for opportunities to make these companies grow. And I came to Russia and no one asked for a passport. In a few years, let's say just in the mid of the first decade, it was already an issue. And a few years ago, it was already a big problem to live as Ukrainian in Russia.
Yeah. Which is your favorite film of him?
I think Leviathan.
Yeah.
It won the Golden Globe, very famous film.
Has anybody seen it here in the hall?
Have people seen it here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Also a very gloomy film. And a film that maybe sort of was a foreshadow of what happened.
Was the film? It was 2014, and it has tragically coincided with the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And that's how it started. And I immediately knew it's going to be a big uproar in the country. It has basically polarized the audience and the society in Russia in a way I've never seen since probably the perestroika times, the end of 80s.
I just saw the film for the second time this afternoon to prepare for this evening. And again, beautiful film. The film is about a guy he's an auto repair guy. And there is a mayor in the village nearby, and he wants to get his premises because he has a nice place at the sea. And that's how the story starts.
Well, it's a bit complicated, you know.
It is.
It's a bit complicated because Leviathan, I believe, is still quite a good movie because it doesn't provide the simple answers to the very complex questions. So basically, it's not just about mayor to make a benefit. It's about mayor who is looking for opportunity to find a place for the new church. Mm-hmm. Because that's a new Russia where you have a Russian Orthodox church in a strict cooperation with the Russian power. So basically, this is a bunch of people trying to extort the property from the simple guy who at the same time doesn't have any idea how to resist, and he doesn't know even how to handle his own family. So this is a model of Russian society where you would hardly find someone good or someone, you know, heroic enough to have a lot of sympathy.
Yeah, but now I couldn't, I mean, when I'm watching this today, I couldn't see the main character. I thought, this is Putin, this is Putin, I'm watching Putin here.
I believe Putin is still much worse than all the characters in this movie. You know, we thought at that time Putin looks like them, and basically they thought that they were attacking the movie in a way that made this movie basically almost banned. But at that time it was possible still to have a discussion in the society, and a lot of people tried to help this movie. But there were a few who were demanding from us to bring the apologists kneeling on the Red Square. And by the way, the director of this film, I produced it, but the director I worked with, I had the privilege to work, Andrei Zvyagintsev. He's one of the most talented Russian filmmakers who did The Return, the movie that won Venice Film Festival. We did together Yelena, Leviathan and Loveless. Also, all of them were winners of Cannes, and two movies were nominated for Academy Award. I'm mentioning that because he's 60 today, and that's important to mention. One of the best filmmakers of our times.
Yeah.
Now, what makes you so interesting is that you are Ukrainian, worked for 20 years in Russia. We know each other for 20 years.
Yes.
You have Russian friends, you know, in high places, oligarchs and so on. But you also worked with Zelensky in Kiev. My first question is maybe on the Russian side, is how is it possible that all these Russian business people, oligarchs, of how you want to call them, almost none of them have come forward when the war started?
Well, we started this serious discussion right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm here.
I know. Let me.
Okay, goodbye.
Let me ask to join me someone to help. Sure. My son. Yeah. I have a lucky surprise today because my son, who is all the time in Kiev, because he's an advisor of President Zelensky and professor of Cambridge University, came to see me today, and would be probably better if he joins me here and help to respond to all the questions about this.
Yeah, so let me stress, Alexander, he's the presidential advisor on economics, so he's very close to Zelensky, and also he's responsible for the biggest state bank, the government representative at the biggest state bank in Ukraine. Okay.
So your question was about the oligarchs.
Right.
They never thought about the war to happen. So that's quite an interesting question, because the war happened in 2014. It started in 2014, but no one took it seriously. No one believed this is a war. There was a kind of an idea of local conflict somewhere in the eastern part of Ukraine, with a lot of political operations, let's say, inside of the, under the surface of the political developments. In Ukraine, the people were dying in the east of Ukraine. In Russia, that was the same life as always, as it was granted. And many of the oligarchs, not only oligarchs, many politicians, many smart, hipsters, intellectuals, journalists, everyone believed it's not possible for big war to happen. And that was an idea of rationality we saw behind Putin and his government. We believed he's rational enough. Okay, he's a corrupted crook, that's clear. His gang is making a lot of money, for sure. But that wasn't always a part of the Russian history. So we were always looking for someone not to actually steal everything, to share it in a rational way between the society and the country. and their own private interests. So, and everyone, especially oligarchs, believed that Putin is the last person to be interested in the escalation of the situation. They never believed he would kill, as in Russian, people say, he would shoot in his own foot. It would never happen, everyone said. And that everyone was wrong, or most of the people were wrong. Among me, there were very, very few people who believed the war is going to happen. And that was my son, by the way, who was talking to me for many years, saying, what are you doing there? It's going to happen any day, the big invasion. But I personally never believed. It's not about oligarchs.
How come, Alexander, you were almost sure that this would happen?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. This is somewhat of an unpremeditated, unplanned event for me. So I was just seeing my father, in fact, and I'm here for a short amount of time for other things, but then it somehow came together. So thank you for having me.
Sure.
Somewhat unexpected, but always happy to. Now, coming to your question, I mean, it would take longer to explain, but it starts on a sort of intuitive level, knowing everything and putting all the puzzles together, all the puzzle pieces together. But fundamentally, I thought it was headed that way for quite some time.
Because nobody wanted to leave it, understand or grasp it that it was going to happen. Even Zelensky didn't believe that this was going to happen.
Well, to some extent, yes, there were different views about that in the presidential office. People were obviously making some sort of preparations, so it wasn't completely out of the blue. The risk was clear, but some of them were hoping for the best, that's true. Some of them didn't want to believe until the very last minute. Now, why did I believe it? I thought it was a natural development for the way that the regime had evolved, essentially, and that it would only essentially lead that way to conflict in order to survive, in order to keep surviving, because otherwise the challenges for its own survival internally would become too large. So.
Can you tell us how the situation is right now in Kyiv and Ukraine in the presidential palace? Because we know that a lot of billions in Washington are frozen now because the right-wing group of the Republican Party doesn't want to give this money. And Europe just decided last week that 50 billions are coming to Ukraine. How difficult is it? Pensions, banks keep them running, and especially making all this equipment to fight a war.
Yes, so the short answer to that is it's very challenging. Obviously, we live in an environment that is sort of dictated and characterized by unprecedented levels of uncertainty, economic uncertainty. And in a wartime economy, there's a feedback loop between what happens at the front lines with the economy itself. So there's a two-way street. If there's bad news on the battlefield, that obviously affects the economy, and expectations adds to the uncertainty. If there is bad news economically and we don't have enough money in the budget in order to balance the budget, that obviously leads directly to problems at the front line. So, I mean, this is really a question of survival, not just economic crises or making sure that we can pay our rents or pay our pensions. Now, coming back to the news, we still have trouble balancing the budget for this year because, as you said, there still is no definite news from the US. There's no good news from the US. So that leaves around 12 billion, I think, gap right now. The 50 billion facility is very good news. It's actually helping reduce a lot of the uncertainty because it's a 4-year program. So it adds a lot to certainty about what's going to happen next year, the year after, and so on. So that's important, both for our social expenditures, which is, as I said, key, but also in terms of making sure that we can finance the war effort. Now, coming back to your question, how difficult is it? It's very difficult, of course. So because
on the other side, we know that President Putin has a war economy and puts a lot of money in there, and he's still getting a lot of money because of oil and gas. So it was an unfair fight to begin with, but now for sure it is, right?
That's right. So there's, yeah. So let me kind of summarize this the way I see it. If you want to model the situation that we have right now with the war, there's kind of 3 fundamental forces at play. This is a war of attrition, right? So it's a positional war, a war of attrition, a classical war of attrition, kind of like the First World War, just with modern weapons. So we are ducked down, and there's sort of incremental movements both ways. In such a war of attrition, there's sort of 3 fundamental forces that decide the outcome, if you want, is the way I see it. One is obviously militarily, so everything that's from tactics to strategy to technology and so on. Now, I don't want to delve into that. But let's just agree that it's more or less even now. We have better tanks, we have some better modern equipment on the ground. Russians still have the supremacy in the air. They have made some advances with drone technologies, etc., etc. So let's say it's more or less even. That's number one, so we can't say. Number two is economically. So for example, the First World War was lost by Germany without Germany losing any of the big battles, just because money ran out, essentially. Now, that's what the Russian regime is hoping for, that will happen to us, so we can't finance the war, and they will decide the outcome for themselves. On the other hand, we were hoping to crush Russia with sanctions. That hasn't helped. That hasn't worked. And that's actually a separate topic of discussions. I have a lot of work that's related to that too, from the beginning, but it hasn't been a strategy that was successful. And Russia, unfortunately, has been very successful on its own part to circumvent sanctions and make sure that they avoid the sanctions regime. So that's force number two, which is relevant in the discussion here. And force number three is, unfortunately, the resource, the human resource, the potential to always resupply the front lines with new troops. And that's where we have a huge disadvantage. Russia has 4.65 more men, so 5 times more men, and the losses aren't necessarily 5 times more on their side right now.
We had a pre-discussion yesterday evening, I don't know if you said it or you, that for every Ukrainian soldier they have to kill like 6 Russians if you want to win on the battlefield, which is an incredible number.
If it's a conventional war.
Yeah, which it is.
Like it happened in the beginning of the 20th century.
But it's a slaughterhouse.
No, but that's a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
No one expects it to happen. But still, we have a lot of people dying. You know, no one publishes let's say, the data you can trust. But still, I saw the numbers of 320,000 Russians who were killed or injured, and not injured so deeply that they're not able to continue the normal life, not even fight.
And if I can ask Alexander Jr., how is the mood in the presidential palace? I mean, the president, Zelensky and his advisors, we know about this rift going on between him and his commander-in-chief, which I think always is bad news if the president and his highest top military guy are not understanding each other. So are you free to tell us what is happening in there?
Not entirely free. But let me just say, so I think fundamentally, so what you've said I'm not going to comment on in detail, but fundamentally we are united, no matter what people say. There is obviously questions on who runs what. I don't want to comment on that too much, and who's going to remain or who's going to come in and so on. So that's, you know, things obviously vary on both sides, by the way. It's just currently there's more discussion with sort of Ukraine in the limelight about what happens to us. But look, given what I said, given these fundamental forces, obviously the mood isn't great, coming back to what you were asking me about. Everybody understands that it's not going to be a simple solution. We're not going to get victory just, you know, easily in a week or so. So this is really a protracted conflict, a conflict that's going to drag out, it seems. What I didn't mention before is that these are the fundamental forces that obviously decide who gets the upper hand in the end. But there's also, if you want, unexpected sort of idiosyncratic, stochastic forces that could come in anytime. So in other words, just using plain language, unexpected surprise factors. You could have something in Russia, kind of like what we saw last year, right? Nobody expected the Wagner revolt, the uprising. You could, you know, this can never be predicted.
Anything can happen.
Anything could happen, especially in a regime like that, because these regimes have one common trait, which is that they look fundamentally sound and stable until the very last minute when they crumble. And that's not something that is actually true for us. It's true for the Russian regime. So that's one thing that could happen in our favor, but it's not a strategy, it's not a prudent strategy to hope for that.
Yeah. Alexander, it's a piece that you wrote in March 2022 in the Financial Times. And it started like this: as the West wages war on the tyranny of the present, it must not destroy the possibility of a peaceful solution.
Well, of course, and we hoped very much to find a peaceful solution. So basically what we're discussing today reflects the underlying desire of everyone today to find, again, the simple answer to the very complex question: when and how this war will end. This is what's going on. And everyone is asking, is it possible to happen that Ukraine would defeat Russia tomorrow? No, it's not. Would it be possible to have Russia defeating Ukrainian army? Not at all. It's not. So are we going to have the 100 years war for the next, century? No. So we will definitely try to find a peaceful solution. But, when I hear the rumors about Putin being able to provide this peaceful solution, I don't trust anyone who speaks about that, because what kind of peaceful solution he can provide us? He cannot come up with. So let's say I'm keeping these territories and no NATO in Ukraine, and everyone in Ukraine believes this is not going to be sustainable peace. This is not a ceasefire. This is a pose that would give a chance to Russian army to work on its mistakes and come back in a better way, because they were defeated in the Battle of Kiev and the Battle of Kharkiv. It happened. So basically, they understand the Ukrainian army is pretty strong. So peaceful solution should be found only with the real intention of Russian government to find this peaceful solution. It's not possible, to do when you don't understand what this war is about. This war is not about Russian territories, Ukrainian territories. They don't pretend to take even the Ukraine. They are, Putin is fighting against the world order. He is fighting against the Americana-centric world. He challenges the world order, let's say, the system of security existing in Europe after the World War II. That's what's going on.
In Europe, maybe you've seen this, a general from Sweden, a Dutch general, a high-placed Dutch general in NATO. The three of them said the last couple of weeks, listen, we should pay attention to this cozy life we have in all of these countries. We should also prepare for a conflict that could start any moment. Everything is now possible. I was wondering, Derek, because one scenario you didn't mention, I don't want to be a warmonger, but have you been talking, yesterday you had a private dinner with your wives, have you been talking about the third option, which is that this conflict, Russia-Ukraine, could ignite a bigger one?
Were we talking about that?
No.
Good for you. Well, maybe you didn't talk about it, but maybe you could think about it or tell us what you think.
Ukraine is the largest by territory European country. It's 40 million people country. And we are actually resisting in this world in a very effective way. So we had 8 years to train our army, and we have a great army, great generals, not just General Zaluzhny, many of them, and it's not easy for us. Would you imagine this kind of war with the countries of Baltic?
But can you guys circle back to the question, could this be the conflict that starts something bigger than what we are seeing now, which is already big?
So I wouldn't want to sit here and be the presidential advisor that says that this is the beginning of the Third World War or anything like that. But look, I mean, obviously things could end badly, obviously. And I don't have to explain that there is crisis spots around the world, that if they erupt, they would encourage further aggression even in Europe. It would potentially encourage further aggression against not Ukraine but other states, other countries, maybe even NATO members, who knows. So that's a possibility. Right now, I think it's remote for now. We don't see, looking at the situation on the ground, you don't see a big buildup of troops around the Baltics, right? There's no capacity to do that. But who knows? You always hear about these possibilities.
You were talking yesterday about the war economy in Russia, compared it to 1944 in
Germany. Which was well, you did actually.
Yes.
Oh, you did.
So you mean the GDP's highest year for German GDP was 1944. Just before, a few months before the end of the war and capitulation of Germany.
We were talking about it because, as you may have read in the newspaper, Russia's economy is at least on the numbers are remarkably well, and Putin, of course, uses it all the time. The growth of the economy in Russia is bigger than any European country at the moment, but it's powered by the war. It's a war economy, and by definition, that's an economy that doesn't produce. It doesn't, it produces, bullets and rockets,
shells,
but it doesn't go into science or medical services or education. But for the moment, I think we both can agree that Moscow is a vibrant city. If we talk to our friends in Moscow, they say, "Come back. It's wonderful here. No problems."
But you can't, right? I mean, none of you, most of the people here can.
But Alexander is on a foreign agent and on the wanted list.
I'm arrested in absentia.
Yeah.
But that's like
I'm a foreign agent, so we cannot come back. But I mean, the idea is of people living in Moscow. I think you would agree that, life is good.
Well, life is good in Moscow, but I will tell you the story. There are plenty of stories like the one I'm going to tell you, but it would definitely reflect the situation, the state of affairs with Russian army. I believe that was January 19th, when one of the popular pro-war Telegram channels, you probably know that the major news platform in Russia is not anymore television, YouTube or whatever, that's Telegram. So one of the most popular pro-war Telegram channel that covers the Air Force military industry in Russia, it's called Fighter Bomber, published the plea to its 400,000 subscribers. What did they ask for? What the person who wrote asked for? And this guy, one of the Russian servicemen, working on the base with the fearsome Russian bombers and fighters, Su-30 and Su-24, he actually asked for firewood because they were freezing, these Russian servicemen. It's very much about Russia. The huge airplanes, the most important military fleet, air fleet, at the same time they are freezing. And the guy is asking for firewoods in the most sophisticated technologically base. Of course, he was found. I don't know what happened with this person. This post was deleted immediately. But I've read so many of these stories which tell us the total truth about how this Russian army suffers, invading forces suffer in Ukraine. That's not so easy. They do love Moscow Live, because Moscow Live is an extraordinarily effective example to demonstrate the whole world how greatly they survive through the challenges of the time of sanctions. There were more than, do you remember how many sanctions were implemented towards, thousands? It's amazing.
It's interesting that you say to us.
No, I mean implemented sanctions by us. Anyway, I mean, it's unbelievable. But if we look at the other cities, not Moscow, not St. Petersburg, but the small cities where the people are mobilized to be sent to the army, when the people are disappearing because no one basically brings the bodies back. When of course, they pay for dead bodies and sometimes you can see the Russian families being happily receiving the money for killed dads, husbands, brothers, sons. It's crazy. That basically tells you a lot about the moral in the society. But these guys don't live so well as we see in Moscow. So basically, when we speak about the Russian economy, I believe this is also the part of this very well known since, last centuries, Russian game of showing off. That's a show off in many ways.
Yeah. Before we let you guys go, do you long for Russia? Do you long to go back to Moscow, and do you miss your life there that you had?
So you should be asking Senior here.
Yes, he never lived in Moscow.
Never. You're more, as I understand from your dad, more in Germany, right? That's the language, you like the language and you live there.
I'm a proud Ukrainian. No. Listen, so I never really lived or grew up in Russia. I came to visit my parents. I never worked there. I never paid taxes there. And I was always, like my father said, always pretty skeptical, let's put it this way, when it came to life in Russia in the long run. So but even I will say that sometimes it does feel. I have a few friends there still. One friend who kind of remained, he couldn't leave. So yeah, I do miss him. In my closest friend circle, there's 2 Russian guys. They both left. One of them left. The other one was already living outside of Russia for many years. But even I sometimes have this sort of reflex of, it feels like a shame that it's all gone. Yeah.
Well, I do miss my friends. I do miss the life that disappeared. I loved Moscow. That's been one of the best cities in the world, with an intense cultural life, with a great people, with the quality of human relationships, with great people around. Most of them left the country. Many of them suffer. Many of them trying to find their, new life outside of Russia. It's not easy for them, as you understand. For us as Ukrainians, it's much easier, and we lived in the different countries, of course, and we wouldn't complain. But when I see my Russian friends, and basically you quoted my op-ed in Financial Times, where I tried to ask, the international audiences, why should the good Russian people be banned outside of Russia? Because I believe that's important to actually see the difference between the different people coming from the same country. I personally believe it's not right to judge people on the place of their birth or on their passports. It's only right to judge them on what they do, on their actions. And many Russian people are acting in a good way, and I know so many of them. But I spent 20 years of my life in Russia. I did some movies that are considered to be very important in both segments, auteur cinema and genre. And I still, miss the people I worked with, of course.
Yeah. On that note, thank you very much for being here in Amsterdam and talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander, and Dirk. Thank you. I would like to invite the next guest on stage, which I introduced already, Marina Ovsyannikova. Would you like to join us here on stage?
Very good, very good.
Take a seat.
Sit down, sit down.
I'll give you a fresh glass of water.
Yes.
Shall we? Is it okay for you if we first start with the clip that eclipsed you to world fame from the television show where you were working, the news show? Is that okay?
Yes, I think so.
It's not something you like to see, but for those.
I became so nervous when I watched such a picture, because it was when the war started. It was a strong emotional shock, and I can't keep silence anymore. And I just crossed this red line and start to speak honestly and openly.
March 14th, 2 years ago, 2022. Here we go.
Ощутить воздействие западных санкций, говорил сегодня Михаил Мишустин. На встрече со своим белорусским коллегой российский премьер подчеркнул, надо усилить сотрудничество в рамках союзного государства, а на совещании в правительстве обсуждали, как сохранить...
То, что сейчас происходит на Украине, это преступление. И Россия – страна-агрессор. И ответственность за эту агрессию лежит на совести только одного человека. И этот человек Владимир Путин. Мой отец украинец, моя мать русская. И они никогда не были врагами. И это ожерелье на моей шее как символ того, что Россия должна немедленно остановить братоубийственную войну. И наши братские народы еще смогут примириться. К сожалению, последние годы я работала на Первом канале, занимаясь кремлевской пропагандой. И мне сейчас очень стыдно за это. Стыдно за то, что позволяла говорить ложь с экрана телевизора. Стыдно за то, что позволяла зомбировать русских людей. Мы промолчали в 2014 году, когда все это только начиналось. Мы не вышли на митинги, когда Кремль отравил Навального. Мы просто безмолвно наблюдали за этим античеловеческим режимом. И сейчас от нас отвернулся весь мир. И еще 10 поколений наших потомков не отмоются от позора этой братоубийственной войны. Мы, русские люди, думающие и умные. Только в наших силах остановить все это безумие. Выходите на митинги, ничего не бойтесь. Они не могут пересажать нас всех.
This first clip we saw. if we go back to the first seconds of this clip, when and where did you decide, I'm going to write my message for the world or for Russian viewers of your television station on a piece of paper, and I will walk into the studio, which is not easy in many studios to do so, even though you were working there?
When the war started, I immediately decided I will protesting against this criminal war, and I want to go to the Red Square at first. But my son, he took away my key from my car and said, "Mommy, you became crazy. What are you doing? You destroy our life. You forgot where you're working now. You are working for the state TV. It's impossible to protest." And then I decided to keep silence, and suddenly I came with this plan. I can protest in our broadcast, and I suddenly just write this poster on my kitchen, and I started protesting on the first. It was the first my first working day. It was Monday. Can you imagine? TV center, Moscow TV center is the most protected area in Moscow. It's barred wall, 4 circles of security, and the last security guy sitting near news presenter. Yeah, but
was it? I mean, the morning you woke up on this Monday, did you decide already at breakfast, okay, I'm going to do this, or was it totally spontaneous, happening in the building of the studio?
First of all, I decided to resign, but when then I thought maybe yes, I will be protesting in the first of my working day. If I can't to do it today, I just resign. I will be keep silence and just resign.
Did you understand or even thought about the impact that this would be having worldwide?
First of all, I thought I can't do it because I think security. I thought security guys arrested me before I came into the studio.
You thought they would stop you somewhere down the line?
Yeah. They can stop me anywhere. Before studio.
And just practically, I mean, did you have? Was it a big sign, or was it like hidden in your coat?
I put this poster inside sleeve on my jacket. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, it was impossible.
Yeah.
And I just took away this poster when I ran into the studio.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if we can just see the first seconds of the clip again, how that works, because what is fascinating to me is the anchor of the show. She has no clue what is happening, right? Did she not see you coming in the studio? Or? Maybe without sound, so we can just see the image. Well, whatever.
It was 6 seconds of truth on Russian state TV.
You said in your book, I lost everything because I told the truth.
Yes, exactly. I lost everything, but I lost my house, all my property, all my bank accounts was blocked, but I saved my soul. I can say I saved my soul. It's most important.
Can you tell us what happened? Okay, we have these 6 seconds, and this is a live news show. Is it, by the way, correct that after you did this, that there is now a delay of 10 or 15 seconds on every live broadcast of the channel?
Exactly. Now in Russia we don't have live broadcast.
Because of you, there's no live broadcast.
Because of me. Yeah, because of me, exactly.
Yeah. So this happens. And when I saw this, I thought, we will never hear from this person again. She will be locked up. She will be silenced. What happened afterwards?
No, she was not silent. She say I was strong on this live broadcast, and I just thanks yoga, sport, and I yeah.
You were saying that your son, Kirill, his name is, said, don't go to the Red Square, don't protest, it's dangerous. Did your family see it happening on television, or naturally they saw it later on YouTube or any other social media? What was their response?
The problem is that this war destroys so many Russian families, and my family is the same. The matter is that Ukrainian part of my family, they support me. I have 2 cousins who live in Ukraine, and they support me. But the most important, my son and my mother, they still live in Moscow, and they refuse to communicate with me because they said, you are a traitor. And they absolutely brainwashed this Putin's propaganda, and they said, you're a traitor, you just leave your country, and they refuse to communicate with me.
Yeah, and your ex-husband is also in television, right? He's also working for TV station.
Yeah, it's a big problem. He's working on Russia TV channel. It's another propaganda channel. And when it's happened with me, he started playing against me. He gave me charges in the court, and finally a Russian court deprived me my parental rights. And they also give me a sentence, 8.5 years in prison for talking truth for war.
But this doesn't happen immediately after March 14th. At first, after this happened, you were interrogated, but then you could go home, right?
Yes, the first time it was 14 hours interrogation, but I have a lot of different administrative charges, and finally it was criminal charges, and I think I had free time interrogation. Yeah, when I return to Moscow, I have also 2 times interrogation.
Yeah. You decide to go outside the country. The German newspaper Die Welt contracts you to do reporting for them, and they are interested to work with you. And you even travel to Ukraine to work for them there. And then suddenly a lot of problems start there, because some people in Ukraine, or many even, say that you are a Russian spy.
Yeah, first of all, I was a British spy. When I did it, then they started talking. I felt myself inside strong information war. And now I perfectly understand it was my mistake to go to Ukraine, because when Russia airstrikes all territory of Ukraine, Ukrainians, people don't want to see any people with Russian passports. And you know, now I perfectly understand it was my mistake. But situation is step by step. Situation is improving, and now I had a lot of messages from Ukrainian side. Ukrainian people sent me a lot of words supporting with support. And yeah, now situation is improving.
Yeah, in your book.
Most important things we must to say, it's the war not Russian against Ukrainians. It's war authoritarian, totalitarian regimes against democracy. It's most important, I think so.
Yeah. You write in your book, but just I tell it in short story, that you are in Germany, then suddenly the German offices of Die Welt are bombarded with social media messages about you being a spy again, and your contract there stops. You go back to Russia, you are detained, interrogated again, and then you decide, I have to get out of here. Your son clearly didn't agree with what you did. But then you have a daughter as well, and she is 11, 12 at the time. How old is she?
13 now.
13 now. Arina. And in your book, you describe how you leave the country, which is a very risky mission, because people are looking for you. The government is looking for you.
Yeah. Finally, they put me under house arrest. It was criminal charge for article about fakes, Russian army. They gave me charges because I exactly said how many children Russian troops killed in Ukraine. It's official information. It's information published in official United Nations site. This site is not blocked in Russia, and everybody can read this information. And can you imagine? They give me criminal charges for fakes article because I just provide this information. Finally, they put me under house arrest, and before 9 days before trial, I managed to escape with the help of French organizations Reporters Without Borders. Yeah. They organized our escape, and now
because you take your daughter with you, right?
Yeah. It was a very difficult situation, and I perfectly understand if I can't took my daughter away from Russia, I have never seen her again. Maybe 6-7 years I can't see her, and I just returned to take my child.
You're describing the way you get out of the country, which is like reading a John le Carré novel, and you can't, the spy writer, but you can't tell us, because it's a secret, which way the organization took you, because they got you out of the country, but it's, I didn't know that this was happening to you. Now you live in Paris. And,
I have political asylum in Paris, finally.
How is life in Paris for you?
Oh, it's difficult life. It's usual life of any Russian immigrants. You can't open a bank account if you don't have apartment. You can't rent apartment if you don't have bank account, and it's just circle. I was fighting with French bureaucracy maybe 1 year, and finally I almost got all my documents.
Come to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
It's easier. Marina, we talked about your personal situation and this unbelievable story, and you told me just before we went on stage that I said to you, well, this is a film, and then you said, well, maybe it will be a film, or you are talking to companies that maybe want to make a film out of it, or what's going to happen?
Now we just making documentary with a British company. It will be a documentary about freedom of speech, about propaganda before American elections, and we want to explain world how important to have freedom of speech in country, and this documentary will be based off my personal story. And
the last question: do you think you have the possibility, you and your daughter, to ever go back to Russia?
It's very important for me what's happened in Russia now, because in Russia now live my mommy and my son, and I can't hug him, and I very missed for him. And if I will be if it will be possible, I want to return. Yeah, of course, I want to return to my own country.
Thank you very much for being in Amsterdam today with us. Thank you so much, Marina.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Our next guest is slightly handicapped, walking on crutches, so I will have a long introduction. John Sweeney is an award-winning British investigative journalist and writer, and he moved to Ukraine, I think, on Valentine's Day, less than 2 weeks before the war started. And Hello, John. Take a seat wherever you want. Thank you for coming out to Amsterdam.
Hold on a second. They're only clapping me because I look as though I support the Dutch football team.
Which is not the case.
And I don't. I just want to get this out right away. It's a pleasure to be here, and well done for Amsterdam for hosting our gallant Russian journalist friends. Bloody well done, Amsterdam. I went to a ski shop in Italy, and I said, I'm bald, I need a hat. And the guy only had this terrible orange hat. And I said, haven't you got one in a better colour? Subtext, not like the Dutch football team. And he said, no, but for you, €3. Subsequently, I auctioned it for Ukrainian charities, and it made £15,000. Mm. This is the most expensive item of clothing I've ever owned. And the guy who won it in the raffle gave it back to me, because it gives me good luck.
Very good. And your followers, is there anybody who's following John on Twitter? Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
You have Twitter following, and John Sweeney Roar, I can recommend it. I've been following it. You have been a couple of times on the show that I'm the anchor of with two other people, and staff members are here, Buitenhof. And interestingly enough, you arrived, I think, like 10 days before the war started, which is, and you went there as a one-man band with the idea, okay, I have an iPhone and I can do a daily report on what is happening. Why did you think it was a good idea to go to Ukraine? Why did you expect what nobody expected?
I was sick to death of the West running away and backing away from Vladimir Putin. I went to Chechnya in 2000, and I wrote it undercover, and I saw evidence of Russian war crimes. Them bombing a refugee convoy, killing around 300 Chechens it was a white flag convoy. They did the same in Ukraine. They used fuel air bombs against Chechen civilians. So I first called Vladimir Putin a war criminal almost 24 years ago. And I was sick of the West backing away, and I thought, I can't not go here. And listen, I arrived on Valentine's Day, and to be honest with you, I've had some pretty awful Valentine's days in my life. But that one was fucking grim. Can I say that? I just did. But just the sense of this kind of horrible heavy metal coming towards Kyiv. And part of it is just so surreal. You can't, is this really going to happen? Are they really going to do this? And they did. And every now and then I saw, I got to the Kyiv TV tower, and I saw the morning after it had been attacked and 5 people had been killed. And what I saw was a mother and her child and an old man, their bodies being taken away by the morgue very early on. And the Kremlin says they don't target civilians. Well, I saw it with my own eyes. Mm. And so Tucker Carlson, by the way, has given an interview to Vladimir Putin.
Did he get the interview?
He's got the interview, yeah.
Oh.
You're supposed to be a TV reporter. You should catch up on this.
I'm adding to the drama. Cheap. Very cheap.
He'll get me later.
Absolutely. As I did yesterday evening, but they weren't there. Tucker Carlson, he was the Fox, Fox host, the Trump advisor.
So, listening to Marina, she can no longer she can't hug her mum, she can't hug her son. The sacrifice that the Russian journalists have made, who are here, the good Russian journalists, has been enormous. The sacrifice of Ukrainian journalists has been enormous too. Many of them have lost their lives. And then Tucker Carlson parades as a journalist, but actually he's a propaganda merchant, no different, in my judgment, than Goebbels.
Rightly so, it's absolutely true. We met a couple of times. Last time was in March, a year ago in Kyiv. And you're well connected. You're walking on crutches because you had an accident walking to a bar, you said, on your videos. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it was after you had a lot of drinks, or but
no. It was, and by the way, I'm putting in an insurance claim as we speak. So it was walking to the bar.
Okay. What I wanted to say is,
by the way, that actually happens to be true.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I believe you because you're well connected. One of the examples is I don't know where you pick up this news, but we arrived with the camera team in Kyiv, and our fixer in Ukraine, when he heard that Biden was coming in 24 hours, 2 days after we came there, he thought that we were spies or that we were well connected to NATO. But in any case, you called me on Monday morning in Kyiv, and nobody believed that he was coming in. And you said, Twan, he's here. Go to that and that location, and he will be there. You have that often. That
but by the way,
first.
Hold on, I'm not an American spy. What happened was, where's my book, Killer in the Kremlin? So when confronted,
free plug.
When confronted with the Ukrainian cop who says you can't go there, I just go, I wrote this book, and it's like a Harry Potter letter. I mean, honestly, the Ukrainians, you wrote this book, can I have a copy? Yeah, or whatever. So it's magical, and it has a real power. And then a Ukrainian cop blocked me. You can't go there in an aggressive way. And I said, excuse me, I wrote this book. And the guy looked at me and said, you can't go there. And I thought there's only Biden can beat my Harry Potter book letter. So it was, and I used to work for the BBC, and I called Biden's visit like an hour before the BBC did, in a slightly kind of pathetic, you're familiar, I hope, with the English primary school phrase, na 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 na.
Yeah. You worked for Panorama, and you also did a lot of reporting on MH17. And one of the stories that I would like to show is you did a doorstep interview with President Putin. You got near him, asked him a question, and let's have a look at what happened there.
What is the essence of the tragedy that is happening now in Ukraine? I think the main reason is that the Kyiv authorities do not want to conduct substantive political dialogue with the east of the country. And now is the beginning of a very important process, in my view, the process of direct negotiations. We have been working on it for a long time and agreed with President Poroshenko in Minsk. Such contacts are starting now.
So you write about this meeting in your book. In short, you basically lied to everybody there to get near him, and you asked him about MH17 as well.
After the MH17 was shot down, we went to Donetsk, and I saw the damage, I saw the wreckage, I saw paperback novels of people taking on holiday, I saw the nose cone, the engines, dead bodies, ladies' hats, people taking on holiday, and those little trunky things that toddlers are moved along at the airport. And if I see one at Heathrow, I still burst into tears at the memory of it. And then we have a meeting at BBC Panorama. Okay, how can we fucking doorstep this fucker? I believe was the phrase I used. And somebody says it's impossible in Moscow, St. Petersburg, because security's too tight. And somebody says it's all right in the sticks. And then somebody clever says he's opening a mammoth museum in Siberia.
A mammoth museum?
For the woolly elephant. Yeah. And the editor of Panorama says, have we got any reporters that look like a professor of mammothology? Oh, fuck. It's my niece's wedding, and I'm not missing my niece's wedding. And they said, actually, it'll be tight, but you can do it. So I wore my... So that picture, anyway, I'm wearing my wedding suit kind of thing. And boy, do I fit in with the other professors of mammothology. Anyway, it's in Yakutsk. It's 9 time zones further east, east of London. 9 time zones. It's further east than Beijing. And there's no food on the plane. And I get off the plane, and the producer said, "We got no time. I need a kebab. I need a kebab." So we go and I wolf this kebab, and then I rock up. And all the other professors of mammothology are shaking with fear because Putin's there, and I'm shaking because, frankly, I've had too much to drink at my niece's wedding. But Putin rocks up, and he's got, if you look at it, he just had Botox, and there's something wrong with his skin, and I kind of wanted to touch it like that. But yeah, transformates, he's not going to hit me, but there's a wall of Kremlin muscle. It's hot, the lights are on, and Putin's banging on, and I'm much taller than him, and he's boring. And suddenly this kebab starts coming up from my stomach, and this kind of, oh fuck, I'm going to projectile vomit all over the president, you know. Here's the positive. Yeah. Had I done that, I would never have had to buy a beer in Kyiv ever again. The negative was I wouldn't have that opportunity. But I managed to suppress my dodgy kebab. And my simple advice, Twan, is if you're going to doorstep Vladimir Putin, don't eat a dodgy kebab beforehand.
Thank you so much for that advice. Listen, we're almost out of time, John. I can listen for hours, but I advise everybody here, you did an interview with Geert Wilders, which is memorable. You should see it. You did a panorama documentary on the biggest scandal now in the UK, the post office scandal. Your book is great. Are you going to go back to Kyiv soon for the second year of this tragedy?
Yes. I fell over on black ice, delivering crutches to Ukraine, and then having fallen over, I thought I need 2 more crutches. Anyway, I'm going back to Ukraine on the before the anniversary because of a lot of things. But number 2 is the Ukrainians. We've forgotten this in Western Europe and across Europe, in comfortable Europe. Ukrainians know that democracy must be defended. The Ukrainians are teaching us that free speech that you enjoy here in Amsterdam and we do in Britain, free speech does not come free. Their fight is our fight, and we must support them. And they must win, because if they lose, then Vladimir Putin and his mad death cult are going to come for us next.
John Sweeney, thank you so much. Great talking to you. Help is on the way. John Sweeney. Okay, for the last segment of this evening, we have a super interesting panel, and again, there is a surprise guest that is not announced when you have seen who is on the guest list here. But Dirk said you have to talk to her as well. She just came back from Moscow. So let's start with her. Anastasia Tenchiva, are you here? Here you are. Hello, Anastasia. Take a seat. You're a reporter for the Moscow Times, and you just came back from Moscow. We're going to talk about that. The other members of the panel are Mikhail Fishman, anchor of TV Rain, Pjotr Sauer, you have seen him already, working for The Guardian, and Alexander or Sasha Gubsky, publisher of the Moscow Times. Thank you so much for being here again. It almost feels like last year when we were sitting here in almost the same formation. Let's start with you. When did you come back from Moscow?
Just a week ago.
A week ago, yeah. Yes. And you are based in?
Based in Amsterdam.
Based in Amsterdam.
I travel back and forth while it's still possible.
Yes. And you're born in Siberia, right?
Yes, correct.
working for 2 years now for the Moscow Times.
Also correct.
Yeah. It's very difficult to get a sense for what is going on in the country. I mean, as we all know, the Dutch reporter for NOS News can't work there anymore. Evan, we have heard of. It's difficult, it's dangerous. Can you tell us what is the latest when you talk to people in Moscow? How's the mood there about the war?
Well, I think we shouldn't think about Russia and Moscow as just one united group of people, because there are different groups. Like there is a group of relatives of mobilized soldiers, for example, who basically want to bring their relatives back, and some of them are against the war. Some still think that it's kind of fine, to be honest. There is a group of people who support pro-peace presidential candidate Boris Nadezhdin, for example. There is a group of nationalists who also support the government. So it's really complicated, but in general, I think the majority of people, they're saying that they're tired, to be honest, to read the bad news about Russia. They're tired to hear bad stories from the front line, for example. They're basically just tired of the war, and they're probably trying to live in a bubble, I would say.
There were 2 Dutch journalists not arrested but detained when they were covering mothers and wives who were demonstrating and protesting. We want to have our husbands and sons back because they have been in the war for 1.5 years or more. You did reporting on those demonstrations as well.
I don't want to share all my secrets, to be honest.
Is that, maybe you can tell us, is that just a small group of people, what we see, or have you got the idea that there is a lot of women who are totally fed up with this, family members who say... Okay.
Well, I would say that there is a growing group of relatives, and because it's almost 2 years since the war started, basically, those relatives, they finally have realized that the government isn't going to bring back their relatives who are at the front line. But it's really complicated because they also cannot protest openly. They also say that when they appeal to the government, they don't usually hear any responses. They're also saying that they cannot do anything to change the situation. So it's really complicated for them. And also they're saying that they feel abandoned because they're saying that the rest of the country, or some people who haven't been affected, for example, by the war, they feel that they don't follow their the news about the mobilization, for example. They don't want to help them. They, I would say, don't really care about the situation.
Pjotr, you traveled to Ukraine. Is there a mirror image in Ukraine where women are also saying this takes too long, we want our men back from the front line?
Yes, of course, it's very, very different. We've seen some of those protests in Kiev as well. I think it's totally different because the women in Kiev can protest, and it can be said aloud, and independent media in Ukraine can write about it without being scared, like in Russia. But of course, we can see the mobilization issue in both countries is very sensitive, because Ukraine at some point will have to mobilize, Russia will have to mobilize. We can see that after 2 years of war, people don't really want to go fight.
Right. Sasha, you are the publisher of the Moscow Times, now here in Amsterdam, and I think it's okay to ask you the same question we were discussing last year. How difficult is it for the Moscow Times to get a readership, to get the funding coming in, while at the same time you have another conflict that completely overtook and overshadows anything that is happening in the world, it seems, Gaza, Israel?
Yeah, thank you, Tuan. Yes, last year, not last year, in 2022, they blocked our Russian website 4 times in 8 months. Now they block us 4 times every new mirror, 4 times a week. So the cyber war is really escalating, and it costs us, of course, a lot because it's technology. We have to create every second day new mirror, but for Google search, this new mirror, it's a new untrusted source. It means that in Google search, not our English website, MoscowTimes.com, but the MoscowTimes.com, but Russian website or this mirror, they are down because we are a new untrusted source. And then, of course, so majority of our readers, they're in Russia. And this is our goal. We are fighting against propaganda, but zero monetization. So, and this is and now we see that, unfortunately, war, maybe for years. So, in Russia, we were all successful businesses. Well, all Russian media in exile. Now we are here, and no chance, maximum what we can earn because of donation. We are lucky we have strong English. Historically, Moscow Times is an English publication. We have strong English version. We may ask donate from our English-speaking readers. We may sell advertising on our English side, but in Russia, zero monetization. So it's hard to believe that Russian media in exile can earn maybe maximum 20%. So it means we depend on grants, and this is now a business model. Of course, unfortunately, our majority market is America, UK, Canada. I'm finished. But and unfortunately, people in America, they're tired of the war somewhere else in Europe. Who knows where's the Europe? Who knows where Ukraine, etc. So readership is going down. It means our revenues is going down, advertising revenues as well. And then, so yes, we need new grants, but grant makers also say, guys, why are you so?
Are you still here?
Yeah, we're still here. Yeah. Why? What was the reason? So, the total budget of 30 Russian media in exile. It's a half of the price of one tank, Leopard. Leopard costs 15 million euros. One tank. So, guys, yes, we need your support. We need your help. Because if the support goes down and stop, it means that all investment you made to us, for us, in us, were useless. And this is the reality.
Yeah, you are in the same building as where Misha Fishman is working, TV Rain. You are world famous in Russia. Everybody knows your name, and you are now broadcasting on YouTube. But again, there is something happening, as I understood, with the regime in Moscow, and they know now how they can block VPN, which is necessary to get your signal, right?
Yes, of course, and Sasha already started talking about that it's a cyber war which is unraveling against Russian media in exile, which also proves that Russian journalism in exile still matters and makes a real difference. And I actually can prove that if needed. You know, yes, well, VPNs are officially banned in Russia as well as Moscow Times, TV Rain, hundreds and hundreds of other news networks and outlets. There's in the air. There's a question what will happen to YouTube in the future. But I have I think I have three things to say about that. One is like. It's a big technical problem to actually block everything and block Russians from access to us virtually. It's not that easy. Second, it's not that easy politically and socially for the regime because blocking YouTube would mean that millions and millions and millions of Russians would be deprived of their whatever they watch on YouTube.
Can you enlighten us? Since in Russia, so you have YouTube.
Yes, it is not blocked. Yes.
Can you go to X, to Twitter?
No, Twitter is blocked. You have to use VPN to get to Twitter, but you can just open YouTube and watch it without VPN for now.
And the other ones, TikTok, Instagram,
Instagram
Facebook,
is blocked.
all blocked.
TikTok, yes,
so
Instagram,
YouTube
Facebook, but YouTube is not. And it's a big technical problem because it's very hard to separate. I'm not a technical guy, but I understand that it's very hard to separate technically YouTube from other Google services, and that nobody knows what would happen.
But your show is still, so people can watch it on YouTube everywhere in Russia?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Till now?
Yes, and even now, 2 years almost in the war.
This is a problem because YouTube is not blocked, but all Kremlin propaganda blocked almost in YouTube. So only that's why they dream to block YouTube, because they're only...
Yes, but there is one thing that I mean, everyone's talking about what will happen when YouTube will be blocked, how we will survive, what will happen. It will mean that we're dead or what. And I think that, well, first, there will be very many ways technically to circumvent these bans, but most importantly, I think that, and history of TV Rain actually proves that these generals who fight us and YouTube, and actually Ukraine in the first place, they fight past wars. And this is a past war. And the tide of time is with us and with information flow. And TV Rain was already banned from networks, from cables, when the zero phase of this war started in 2014, because war and censorship, they come always together, and TV Rain was blocked, was banned from cables, and went into oblivion sort of for some time, only to resurrect and reinvent itself a few years later on YouTube with gaining more bigger audience and making more impact than it even did before. Yeah. Actually, thanks, I think it's worth mentioning that it wouldn't happen without TV Rain's founder, Natasha Sindeva, who is present with us here, because without her resolve, it just wouldn't happen. We wouldn't be sitting here. So,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
We already survived many times, and I strongly believe we will survive another fight.
Yeah, the elections are coming up in Russia, presidential elections. Although, I mean, can you even call it like that? Because any opposition candidate will not be registered. I think. What is the latest news on the candidate that maybe was going to be a competitor, not really to Putin, but at least...
Well, yeah, it's really unpredictable right now, but the Central Commission said that at least 15% of the papers have mistakes, and that the presidential hopeful has 2 days, as I remember, to check the papers and to review them and to prove that his papers are right. So
what is your guess? Will he... No, nothing.
But can I add one thing to that about this? Because this is exactly the example of why we matter and why what we do matters. Because yes, this is this candidate, anti-war candidate who stood up to challenge Putin, whose name is Boris Nadezhdin, and those of you who follow probably saw these people standing in queues in order to submit their signatures for him, and thousands across all of Russia. And it's only the tip of the iceberg, actually, because the polls already we have show that support for this guy, whose name didn't ring a bell yesterday for no one. Well, except for us, because we know professionally, but nobody knew him. Already showed from 10 to 16% in support, in his support, which is not about him.
But if he's not on the ballot, what difference does it make?
It's a big difference because this momentum that already is there, already has been created for anti-war sentiment present in this election, would be impossible without TV Rain, Medusa, Moscow Times, all other journalists working from exile, because they, us, helped create, because, well, propaganda doesn't talk about it. That's what. So without Russian media in exile, this momentum wouldn't happen. And what happened, even if he will be banned, what happened is already very important.
Yeah, I think psychologically it's important, because the whole point of the Russian government is to isolate you as a Russian living there, to think that you're the only one who could be against the war. And obviously speaking out loud against the war is criminalized, writing about it online is criminalized. But suddenly, if you see these long lines of hundreds of people, it feels like a protest again. You know, some people I talked to stand on those lines, they said it felt like 2018, 2019, when you could still go out and protest, and you suddenly remember that you're not the only one who thinks the same way against the war.
Are you saying Putin is walking a fine line in that he doesn't dare at the time to get these people off the street, to arrest them, also, for example, for the
because
wives?
they were standing there legally to sign in for a candidate, to sign the signatures. So nothing they were doing was illegal, even in today's Russia.
But I saw some reports here, and you could see that people who were planning to vote for him still were very cautious about saying anything about him on camera.
Of course, you know, I think in an authoritarian regime, and it's almost becoming totalitarian, you know, speaking your mind is scary. And Boris Nadezhdin himself is very careful about what he says, of course. He calls the war a special military operation. But still, it's very symbolic, of course. And as Misha said, without Dost, without Moscow Times, you know, people wouldn't see that these lines even exist.
Yeah. You work for an international newspaper, The Guardian. Yeah. Is it more difficult compared to a year ago to get your ideas, story ideas about Ukraine and Russia in the newspaper?
Do you mean from a sort of editorial perspective?
Well, because the competition is now with another war. And
yeah, no, you can definitely feel the
war correspondent, the famous war correspondent of CNN once told me the audience that we service only is interested in one conflict. They can handle one conflict and that's it.
Yeah, if you look at the home pages of The Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post, we all had very intensive live blogs. A lot of them have been quietly taken away, or you know, sometimes they reappear, but not as often. Page views are not the same. You know, people don't have the attention span for 2 wars. People are getting tired. But at the same time, especially with Russia, I noticed that the interest inside Russia, what's going on, is immense. You know, I think top 5 most read pages in the whole of the year for The Guardian were the Prigozhin uprising, because you know, people are fascinated what's going on inside Russia, and it's a very hard story to tell, because there's so few correspondents.
2 questions in one for all of you. I mean, what is the future for the media that you are working for now here in Amsterdam, which, as we discussed a year ago, is very difficult to report about your country so many thousand miles away? And the second one is, on the November 4th, there's another election, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. What if the first one wins the US elections? Trump. What will be the impact for you guys?
Well, apparently, if Trump wins in November, that might mean that we are here to stay for some time longer. We all understand how much is at stake, this discussion this evening here started with there's billions of dollars being frozen now of American aid, and of course Putin intends to see Trump. He sees him as his ally and buddy, and of course he will. His idea is that after at some point, without America's involvement, Ukraine will surrender. That's what's going to happen. So, and it's not the question in Washington. It's not even though they will be the first victims, but you just think of it, of what happens if Russian army, not Russians, of course, but Russian army, Putin's army, starts really winning this war, crosses Dnieper River, and moves forward towards. It's hard to imagine now, I understand, but in few months the situation might be different from what we're talking right now. Imagine these millions and millions of refugees. Imagine these pictures that we saw a year and something ago, and we still keep seeing of Kyiv being shelled, etc., etc. That's not even Ukraine's, as already been said, future is at stake and their freedom and independence. It's about us. It's about us, it's not about me as a Russian journalist. It's about it's about humanities, how it will survive. It's about how the world order will survive. And that's why it matters not only for us, who are, of course, deeply involved, but for all of us here, for all of us who care about how our world will look like in very near future. So that's why it's so important.
Do you think that there is in Europe or in the Netherlands a false sense of security? Can you take the microphone, please?
Well, yes, but again, of course, it's war. We are enemies of regime. So yes, is it dangerous? Yes, it's dangerous. But if you, we just finished security training. But if you think every minute, am I secure or not? Could I be poisoned or killed? Well, you became crazy. No, we chose our road. We are following this road, and this is how we behave. But definitely Amsterdam is a great city.
No, to answer so whether we here as the Dutch feel full sense of security, I think with Trump's election coming up, I think it's clearly obvious we don't know what to expect from Trump, from a presidency, but it's clear that Europe itself needs to get its shit together and come together and then realize that Ukraine is a European nation, and we are the ones that they need to rely on, and not the US in the long term.
Well, yeah, I just want to add that speaking about journalism, the situation isn't going to the right direction, and it's really hard to report about Russia being in Amsterdam. It's also very difficult to do any reporting being in Russia because people don't want to talk, and people are afraid to share their real thoughts. And I don't think that the situation will improve, to be honest. So it's really a big challenge for us to do our stories.
Yeah. It's hard to work, you say, in Russia, and also this evening opened with Pjotr telling about his friend Evan. I have to ask you this question. I mean, when you fly into Moscow, naturally you are a journalist, you want to report on everything that is happening. Is in the back of your mind maybe crazy times to go there? What?
Sure, every time, every day.
Yeah, but you
this
still
is extremely brave, actually.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We just have to understand that.
Yes, because you have to understand that in Russia, if you kill a person and this is your first crime, you will be imprisoned for 6 years. But if you tell truth about the war, it's from 7 till 15. Only because of that. Even Gishkovich, he accused of espionage. He's pure journalist. 20 years of prison. He's not proclaimed guilty, but this is what it can be. No, definitely, Nastya, she's a hero.
Are you guys ready to take a couple of short questions from the audience? Yeah? Anybody has a question, please keep it short, but then we'll raise it to the panel here.
We can give one microphone, yeah.
Any news on EU membership of Ukraine? Yeah, the special advisor, economic advisor to the president. Shall we give you a microphone? Here you go.
Well, I mean, I can't add too much that was already said and communicated by publicly. I think we have the candidacy status, so it's going to take time. Obviously, we've actually been very fast in implementing a lot of the reforms and legislations ahead of the status, so already kind of as homework done ahead of time, essentially. But there's no illusions about the fact that it's going to take years, and before the security situation is going to be resolved, it's unlikely to happen. Yeah.
And what about NATO membership?
Well, that's even less likely to happen until the security situation is really resolved.
Yeah, very clear. There was another question. Yes, please. Oh, there's a microphone coming up, sorry.
Even better, thank you. Thank you so much for tonight. It was really insightful. I've seen an interview on YouTube that was done by seemingly a very casual Russian man, and I noticed Russian people answering very honest, actually, recently, and almost, very openly criticizing the regime. can any one of you reflect why they feel free or not? I was really confused because she mentioned that it's so dangerous. Did you see it as well? I'm curious.
So he saw an interview with our statement of a guy in Russia, I suppose, was very critical on the regime. Is that something that you have seen?
Some kind of street talk. 4020. Well, we know that there are, at least I would say, I think several. Well, I know at least 2, but I think there are more who've been charged for these kind of street talks, for talking for BBC maybe.
Deutsche Welle had
Deutsche Welle, exactly. Yes, that happened at around a year ago. So that, I mean, that makes the case.
Yeah, I think the concept of vox pops are extremely dangerous in Russia, and as a editor and journalist, I think you also have to protect the people you interview. Moscow Times does really good vox pops, but they're also very careful on, I think, what to show.
May I ask you another example that I saw? There was a wife who was traveling to Ukraine, a Russian wife, going to pick up her husband, who was in the army fighting, and he died just, I think, the day before she arrived to pick him up. And she did I don't know if this is true, if it was fake news. I don't think it was fake news. I think she made a statement by herself on her iPhone, and she put that online and saying, "Listen, we have been lied to." It is. Have you seen it? Have you seen this?
I've not seen it, but I think the wives of soldiers is a very special group. That's why we've seen these protests as well in Moscow.
They're untouchable.
They're untouchable for now, huh? But you know, at this protest in Moscow, all the journalists arrested or detained for a bit, but the wives were not touched. And I've spoken to some of those wives, and if they were anyone else but a wife of a soldier, they'd receive long sentences. So they're very, very difficult demographic for the Kremlin to deal with, because you know they are the wives of the men that are defending the nation. And for now, the Kremlin hasn't figured out yet what to do with them. But they might get charged. And I think that's why, to answer your question, this woman probably felt okay to make that video. And I've also spoken to grieving fathers of Russian soldiers, right, who have turned against the government. And they've also been left alone.
It's a bit similar as the women at the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina when they had the junta there.
Yeah,
and they were
exactly
almost okay to demonstrate.
But we already seen this during the First and the Second Chechen War, when wives and mothers of Russian soldiers, they also protested against war, and that was the beginning of mass protests. So some expert believes that these mothers and wives of soldiers in Chechen war, they helped to stop the war. But of course, here it's the different scale. But anyway.
We're almost at the end of this evening. You have all mentioned how important it is to have a free press and to keep on broadcasting, printing, telling the stories that people in Russia don't get. At the same time, it must be so frustrating to do this from here and to see your audience dwindle, what you had in Russia and all the techniques that the Kremlin is using to silence you. Do you think you can continue, money-wise, people that can report on this? You as the publisher of the Moscow Times.
Definitely, of course, we continue, we'll continue, because again, so our traffic in Russia is growing because people see that, what we do. So we're important for Russian society, for Russians in Russia. Definitely we will.
Misha?
Yes, the last question actually brings us to the issue of professional challenges that we face as Russian journalists in exile. The first challenge is purely that, for example, TV Rain is labeled as an undesired organization, which means that communicating with TV Rain on air is criminalized. So basically, anyone we interview from Russia can be charged criminally for just talking to TV Rain. The second issue is that we have to always think of if we put somebody in danger, like with some kind of these kind of street talks and everything, which of course doesn't make our lives easier. It makes it harder and harder. But what we see now is that anti-war sentiment And it's proven, I feel it with my everyday work. I know it because this is what polls show, that anti-war sentiment is growing. And the more they fight Russian journalism in exile, the more it matters, actually, because the more the impact is. And these lines, Boris Nadezhdin's candidacy in itself already showed that. And it's not the end. The number of viewers, as I understand, for TV Rain has grown since the start of the war.
It's maybe the
and majority is in Russia.
So the biggest compliment of the Kremlin is that they are taking you seriously.
They are, and it's it makes sense to take us seriously because it works, and it will continue to work. It's very important.
Keep up the good work. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all for coming to the stage and telling your stories, which are important. And I would say the last word is to the founder of the Moscow Times, and that's why we're all here tonight, because you decided to do it again, even though there is war fatigue.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming. As we said in the beginning, we were a little nervous that we would have a half-full room because there was no attention for the war anymore. So it's great that you're all here. Of course, all my colleagues, I'm so proud of what they're doing, and you know, they need support. I also want to, you know, we talked about money. So as you leave, you will get a leaflet with a QR code, and if you have the possibility, scan the QR code. It's 10 euros, but you know, if all of you or a lot of you do that, it would be very helpful for us. So small donations for the good cause. And also our friends at the Comité for Ukraine, there's a solidarity walk on the 24th, on the birthday of the second year of the war, very important in The Hague. If you can join, I hope to see you there. Thank you very much. And
the authors will sign the
books.
The
books are for sale. So take the chance. They are here now. And, you know, I don't hope to see you next year.
Fijne avond, de bar is open.